Hey everyone, how's it going today? And welcome back to another update. So in today's update, I really want to answer one of the most golden questions that I do know that a lot of people have been asking, which is about whether or not we can potentially see more fourth stimulus checks. So as in like even more fourth stimulus checks. Because as most of you guys know is that in one of the last updates, we talked a little bit about how there are several states that have now officially approved, again I repeat, approved their own version of some kind of fourth stimulus check program. So huge congrats there. We already talked about it in the last video, so I'll put it at the very end screen. I believe the name of the video, it'll be at the bottom at the end. Huge thanks if you guys have already checked it out, but I believe it's literally just called approved $1,050 fourth stimulus check, because that's the largest stimulus check amount. Of course, there's also a lot of other programs. But so in today's update, to follow that is I really just want to answer the golden question about whether or not we can potentially see more in the near future. And as always, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to also just comment down below, or really any personal thoughts about anything. So with that being said, we're gonna go jump right to it. But as always, real fast, the same exact drill, 10 really quick seconds. If you guys enjoy videos like this, remember to smash the like button. As always, consider subscribing, hitting the bell, or you can watch to the end and maybe decide, but hopefully you guys will enjoy this. And as always, feel free to comment, as just mentioned, any questions, thoughts about honestly just anything. So with that being said, let's get this video started. So as just mentioned is that there are now actually several states and several groups of people, specifically applying to about 20-something million people, that have now officially or are now set to receive some kind of fourth stimulus check in the very near future. But when it comes to a lot of the other states, the answer really quickly to that question, but of course, there's a much more detailed answer about whether or not we can potentially see more stimulus checks, is that we very much actually can. But in terms of actually explaining what can potentially cause this, is that there are technically many different factors that can potentially trigger or let Congress to potentially do more fourth stimulus checks. But there are many articles that are talking about it right now, and probably the most prominent thing that can potentially happen to lead to more stimulus checks is everything related to inflation and also the recession. So essentially the big idea, and I think this is really important to just have a little bit of a history background about what it is, and because it is very relevant, is that because over the last 20-something years, we have had multiple cases where, because of some kind of recession, so this is actually a historical thing, where because of some kind of recession, it prompted Congress in order to do more stimulus checks. Back in 2001, so at that time I was still a student. Feel free to share where you guys were at. I was in New York City. This was also the year of 9/11, sadly, but many of us remember it well. But the idea is that back in 2001, when they were about to enter into recession, or during that time period, they provided a $300 stimulus check, which back then $300 is probably a lot closer to about $400 to $500 in buying power today, simply because of inflation. Back then things were a lot cheaper, so today, the amount of things that you could have gotten for $300 back then is probably equivalent to the amount of things you can buy today for $400 to $500. And then flash forward a couple of years into the future, now in 2008, they also back then did have their own stimulus check, but specifically they did a $600 stimulus check for singles, a $1,200 stimulus check for couples, and then on top of a $300 stimulus check for every single child that you currently have. So what this really means, and the significance of why this matters, is that because if history was to repeat itself, because we have already seen physically happening, from proof of history, that, when we had a recession in 2001, they did stimulus checks. When we had a recession in 2008, they did stimulus checks. And when there was obviously a massive fear of, a recession in 2020, we had 3 stimulus checks. So now we are now in 2022, is that it is very, very probable. It's not to say that it will happen, but it is very probable based off of what we know, if history was to repeat itself, that if we truly ended up in another recession, it can potentially now prompt Congress in order to do more stimulus checks. Now, one very, very, I think huge, maybe huge difference between back then and today, and I think this is something maybe really important to address, is really about the fact that one of the biggest differences between today and those recessions that had happened in the past is that we didn't really have as big of a case of inflation. Because as most of you guys know right now is that because we are going through very, very massive record high inflation, and as most of you guys know is that we are going to be getting, if you're watching this on release date, the new inflation report next week, or if you're watching this in the future, it's very possible maybe it has already come out, so we will finally get the answer revealed. But the big idea is that at this current time, when we get that new inflation report, and based off of the other past inflation reports that we've already had, the big bottom line is that it's not doing very, very well. And it's because of that reason, one of the biggest things that's actually making Congress a little bit hesitant to do more stimulus checks is because of the inflation, because they are very, very afraid that they start to increase the money supply. So specifically to, approve more fourth stimulus checks, it's going to add even more to the inflation situation, because as people have more money, they will spend more money, and as a result, prices go up. And this is basically the story of what happened in 2020 and 2021, which is wild, time flies. And thank goodness, because that was a very, very difficult year, I do know, for a lot of people here, including, this whole thing started because of how difficult it was. But the big idea really is that because of the inflation situation, one of the biggest goals that Congress has right now is to try to not just limit the money printing, but also to essentially, interestingly now, remove a lot of money from the system. The specific term is called quantitative tightening. Long story short is that if they pump money inside like they did in 2020, there's more money to move around, but as a result, prices go up. If they start to take away money from people, then what happens is that prices go down because people don't have as much money to physically spend. However, there are also a lot of people in Congress that are now trying to really preach for something called inflation/recession checks. And how this specifically works is that they're going to be trying to create a program in order to try to fight inflation, or simply put, to help families pay for the extra cost now that it takes to survive and live by giving them stimulus checks, or in some cases now many people can call a survival check, in order to get through these times. But the biggest difference between what happened back then and what might potentially happen today is that because they are trying to remove money in the system, yes, it is true, it does mean is that they probably will not be trying to approve extra aid to provide stimulus checks. However, what I don't think a lot of people are talking about right now is that even though they might not necessarily print more money to do these programs, what they very, very much can do is to take the money that currently already exists and try to redirect it and spend it to do stimulus checks. This is what is happening in California. This is what is happening in several states. They are taking the aid that they already have and trying to redirect it and spend it on these social programs. So the big idea is that, to answer maybe the golden question about what this whole video is about, is that we very much can actually still see more stimulus checks, and it's very probable that we very much likely will, actually, especially if we do really enter into a recession. But I think the biggest takeaway is just it's really important to know what's happening in our country, and it's even just as important to know why it's happening in our country. So again, a little bit of the history lesson behind it, and then also to know on the economic side of, if we were to do these programs, how would it be possible, and where would the money actually physically come from to create these programs. And of course, that's pretty much what I hopefully just wanted to express and clarify in today's video. So with that being said, that's pretty much what I really just wanted to share in today's update to maybe explain the situation of what's happening. So as always, if you guys maybe enjoyed that, remember to smash the like button if you guys haven't done so. Consider subscribing, especially as we get more information. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts about really honestly just really anything. It really is always great to hear from you guys. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay well, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.